Bloody hell, bloody hay fever. Hello, how are you? Good. Yeah, here we are now. Bloody lovely day. Lovely Irish spring day. Sun shining. It's kind of warm, but I still need my cardi. Here she is. My new-ish Mark I Ford Focus 1.4 LX, which means, I don't know, it sounds like it's supposed to stand for luxury, but it definitely isn't. So yeah, so this is my newest car, which if you'd been listening to my podcast, which if you haven't been, what have you been doing with your life? I mentioned that I picked this up. I picked it up on April 9th, mostly because the easing of county restrictions, obviously, or being able to travel within your own county, were lifted on April 12th. And I knew that if I didn't have a car, because obviously my BMW is not currently mobile. I'm still open to offers on that, by the way. It's still sitting in my driveway. Yeah, I was going to need something to go for a spin, because if there's one thing I missed the most with the 5 kilometre restrictions was being able to go for drives. So I knew I needed a car. So I kept my search within a 5 kilometre radius, and this came up just within the 5 kilometres at a dealership, thankfully. I had been keeping my eye out for Mark I Focus. I preferably wanted either a 1.6 or a 1.8, but not that they're necessarily hen's teeth, but they're not that common, whereas the 1.4s are, to a penny. It was originally advertised for 999 quid, and then they dropped it down to 699, which I didn't argue with. That's what I ended up paying for it. It came with an NCT until next February, and a little bit of tax till the end of the month. Yeah, and the insurance was 200 quid cheaper than my E39 BMW. Yes, it's the 1.4, which is slow, to say the least. But look at it. It's the I'm gonna have to kneel down a bit so you can see me on camera. So it's obviously this design first came out in 1998. I think it was released in the Geneva Motor Show in 1997, and then they went on sale in 98. And look at it, it still looks fresh. Some people thought it was a bit controversial at the time, but considering the blobby Escort it replaced, revolutionary, it still looks fresh. You wouldn't call this this particular one is a 17-year-old car, and obviously the design itself is 23, which is terrifying. But yeah, what a piece of design. The new edge design philosophy that Ford brought in the late 90s. Stuff like the Cougar and the Puma were obviously included in that as well. But let's have a wee walk around, shall we? One of the design features they brought in with the Focus, which I never really completely understood, was it's fun. As a drunken youth, I used to love going around and doing this to the badges of Ford Focuses. But this is how you open the bonnet. So you can't actually access the engine while it's running, because you need the key to get into it. But hey ho, I shall, you turn it one way to unlock it and then turn it the other way to actually release the bonnet. Wow, and there it is in all its magnificence, the 1.4. I don't even know what the engine code is. Underpowered, rather agricultural lump. It's made it to a gearbox, a 5-speed gearbox, which they've been using since the 1970s, which admittedly actually is quite nice. It's quite mechanical and snickety, and considering it's over 40 years old now. They've really refined that design, so it is a nice thing to shuffle the cogs, huh? New edge design was brought in into the cabin as well. Nice clear white on black dials. The steering wheel it's a bit chunkier than I'd want, but it's a nice squidgy soft material, and it's holding up its age pretty well. Stupid radio controls like Renault use. Well, it's actually the volume controls are actually quite handy. Consumer voice in every video I have. This Bluetooth thing is great. The stereo is not too bad. It's fine. It's a cassette player that I'm never going to use. As I once you have something like this, good to go. No aircon. Fair. There's this phone holder which it doesn't fit my smartphone. That's fine because I have a magnetic thing. What else is there? Oh yeah, there's a 12 volt. So obviously I have my Bluetooth in there. There is a 12 volt back here where I keep the lighter. These cup holders, my water, they do fit a coffee cup nicely, but my water bottle won't go into them. You can just about squeeze it into this back one here. So again, it's fine. The handbrake gator pops up every time you use the handbrake. Here's this lovely 6-speed, which I don't know if it'll transpire on video, but as you can feel, it's a nice, direct, clunky is the wrong word, but chunky, I should use, shift. It could do with a 6th, because when you're doing about 100 on the M50, it's doing about 3,500 RPM. I don't know how economical it is yet. I haven't put any more than 20 quid into it, because, you know, fuel's expensive at the moment, 150 a litre. But I think I got 110 miles out of one fill-up, which, I don't know, I haven't calculated the figures yet. The cheapest, shittest, I think only trumped by Toyota with how cheap and shit that LED clock is, but there you go. Wing mirrors are a nice small size, but you can actually see loads of stuff out of them. Because most modern cars now have giant wing mirrors and you can't actually see anything. Let's see what the back is like. So the driver's seat is set up for me, and I'm 6'3", and I'm not going to say I'm got loads of room, but I could go somewhere in the back of this. Plenty of headroom, which is good. It goes back to the packaging of this car, and you know, the way the independent rear suspension, the crossblade, allowed for more interior space, and the tall roofline. But obviously, I probably wouldn't sit behind myself because that's not possible. But if I got behind the passenger, if you can still see me, the passenger seat is in a commodious position, and look, I have loads of legroom. No, camera! Isn't it great to be able to live our lives again, kind of travel around our own counties? Fucking haircut wouldn't go astray though, I must say. Bloody warm as well. Irish spring, huh? Probably shouldn't have worn this cardigan. Have to keep the windows up as well, keep the breeze out, you know, keep the quality up for all you people. Doesn't help that this LX model of Focus doesn't come with air conditioning, but I will struggle on. So, what's this car like to drive? It's pretty amazing, to be honest with you. So that the rear suspension, the control blade independent rear suspension, which gives the packaging of a trailing arm, but with the geometry of a double wishbone. And as we are now driving enthusiastically, should I say, up some mountain roads, I'm going to drop it into third, over some twisty bumps, you can take silly amounts of speed into a corner, and it just rotates around its own center point so beautifully. It handles better than some cars I've driven with sporting intent, let alone any other competitors in the hatchback market. So when this did have to go in to get its braking issue resolved, probably the only thing that lets it down dynamically are the brakes. Like when there's some sheep in the road. Now they're fine. They're completely acceptable. As I said, you know, it's not actually a sports car. You're not supposed to be the last of the late breakers in this hatchback. And they're much better now than they were, because a couple of days after I picked it up, there was a strange grinding noise coming from the rear drums. I did try to investigate myself to see what the issue was, but the rear wheels were so seized onto the hubs, no amount of swearing, hammers, using the weight of the car could get them to budge. So I just ignored it and turned up the stereo. Then I went out for a spirited drive with another motoring enthusiast friend. Another shout out to Ian. Again, if you're listening to the podcast, you'll have heard this story. And we were giving it some brio across the roads, and we came to a rather sharp right-hander, like the one that's about to come up here now in a moment. And when I went to brake, the brake pedal went all the way to the floor, which was terrifying. And again, Ian, I promise you, I would have put it in a ditch rather than putting it into the back of your Mini. You know, I understand the value of a good car, and yours is one. As you can hear, they're squeaking. That's only because there's new pads were just fitted just yesterday, and they're still kind of bedding in. But what happened anyway was the brake master cylinder basically exploded. And it just pissed brake fluid everywhere. But the dealership I dealt with, I must say, they've been very, 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 very helpful, which isn't always a guarantee in the car buying world. They gave me a 30-day warranty with the car, and when I brought it back and explained to them, there was no questions asked. They took it in, they did the work, and they gave me a courtesy car. So yeah, the brakes are fine. Just to make sure your Focus has a functioning master cylinder before you go out on any spirited back road blasts. The courtesy car they gave me was a 2006 1.6 FSI Mark V Golf. And while the cabin in that car is more commodious, and it probably does a bit better at drowning out noise, the way the thing drove, it certainly wasn't playful or fun to knock around a set of back roads. And its high-speed ride on the motorway, for example, was questionable. I'm not saying it was intolerable, but it was jiggly, to say the least. Whereas this manages to be both dynamic, incredible body control, take speed around corners, which it has no right doing, and yet on these horrible, we're coming up to one of the worst parts. My phone falls off. This is a terrible piece of road, and it is absolutely just absorbing every single bump. I can hardly feel them in the cabin. The steering, very direct. I wouldn't say it's bristling with feel, although I can feel what the front axle is doing. But hey, look, this is a it's supposed to be a family hatch. I'm not expecting it to be bristling, but it's nicely weighted. The chassis is an absolute peach, as I've already discussed, by the way it goes around corners like that. But it's got incredible torsional rigidity, so it's not flopping all over the place. And also it's quite light. It weighs less than 1,200 kilos, and you can feel all that, especially in this one, because this is the 1.4, as I've said, which has no power, absolutely no power. The first and second are actually quite low geared, so you're not going to be embarrassed at a set of traffic lights when a turbo diesel Qashqai soccer mom is behind you and is in a rush to pick up her kids. But then in the upper echelons, it kind of starts to show its weaknesses. It's all out of puff really by about 4,000 RPM, and it's a gruff sounding engine. It's definitely the low point of this entire car. Lack of power. I don't even think they could measure the torque, it was so low. And what's going on up here? It's a bit of hooliganism. But yeah, you can buy this car with larger engines, which admittedly I was looking for. I was looking for at least a 1.6 or preferably the 1.8, but few and far between. And this car, it's got a 1 year, where's the 1 year's NCT, came with a little bit of tax. It's way cheaper to insure than my BMW, and it was €699. You see, I'm always there for you with the consumer advice. I suppose while I'm driving, and one of the reasons why I decided to make this video, because a week to the day after I bought this Mark I Ford Focus, Richard Parry-Jones, who is an engineer, and it's not often engineer names become infamous in the car industry, but Richard's name did, and sadly Richard passed away, as I say, a week to the day after I bought this car on the April 16th. in a tragic accident. I believe it was a farming accident. I didn't delve too deep into the details, but Richard Parry-Jones was, as I said, he was an engineer by trade, and I think he was CTO and head of product development, etc. I'm going to make an absolute mockery of what his official titles were, but he was a key figurehead in bringing this car to market, along with the first gen Mondeo and a few other things. All those cars of the new edge design of the late 90s and early millennium from Ford. But he was also a key pusher for the suspension setup, the rear suspension setup. And while I don't know what the long term is with this car, I mostly bought it because with the removal of restrictions on April 12th, not removal, the loosening of restrictions on April 12th, I was like, I need something to go driving in. So I bought this. But although it's a tragic coincidence that Richard Parry-Jones passed away quite soon after I bought this car, but like my BMW and its original owner and his sad passing, I kind of feel like Richard Parry's passing is some sort of small sign that maybe I should hang on to this thing. We shall see. We shall see. But anyway, rest in peace, Richard Parry-Jones, and love and thoughts with your family and your friends. But you left a good legacy. Surprisingly, for a Ford of the late 90s and early millennium, and there's only a small bit of rust down here at the bottom of the door, which you can probably see better on the inside. I'll go in closer. As you can see, we're a bit flaky down the bottom of the door here. But I say, considering it's a late 90s, early millennium Ford, that is all the rust there appears to be. All the sills and arches are still there. So, you know, a door shouldn't be too hard to replace. The Focus's biggest party trick probably though is the boot space, because the independent cross blade suspension allowed for greater boot space generally, but then also the seat bases in the back flip up, which means you can put the rear seats completely flat, which means there must be, I don't know, 37,000 litres of space in there. Yeah, I think even if, so much so, I think even I would fit in here. Yep, screw you and your housing crisis. I'll just live in my Ford Focus. This seems to be a good way to sign off this video. I hope you enjoyed all these. There were some facts in this video, I think, about the Ford Focus. But do stay safe, stay well. I'll be with you again soon. Oh, just completely off topic. If you haven't been listening to the new Villager song, the first day it's called, I suggest you get on that. It's going to be my summer jam. But yeah, I'll sign off there. Be safe, be well. I'll talk to you again soon. God bless. It'll get out of here. Bollocks.